Welcome to the Mischief Maker broadcast, where chaos, creativity, and common sense collide. Your host, Joel Freeman, was kicked out of high school in Alberta, Canada. He left home at 17 and hitchhiked around North America as a long-haired hippie and dope-smoking fool. He made a 180-degree change, becoming one of the first chaplains in the history of the NBA. As a professional speaker, Joel has traveled to well over 55 countries. His many books have been published in 28 foreign translations. Pieces from his Black History collection have been seen by millions at the United Nations and many other venues. And now, the Chief Mischief Maker himself, Dr. Joel A. Freeman.
Hey, here we are in Studio B in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and have a terrific show planned for you tonight. You heard the voice, Herman Veal, in the opening, and if you want more information about him, just go to chiefmischiefmaker.com, and you'll hear more about his voice and what he can do for you. Our sponsor for the show is Rosetta Universe. I've got some swag on here, and a little bit later, we'll be talking a little bit about that too. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about a white man's journey into Black history. Now, many places I've spoken on this topic, and it's just been a very interesting ride. I'll share a little bit about that, but a little bit later on in the show, we're going to be meeting a gentleman by the name of Julian Netter, and he's become a dear friend. A straight shooter. You'll find that he's not a lack for genius, intelligence, and a lack of words. And he backs everything up with statistics, with information. And as you know, this is a politics-free zone, so we'll do the best we can to share this information in a way that will connect with our audience. We understand that there are people from Australia, from Japan, from the United Kingdom, India, Canada, United States. So we'll try to serve it up in such a way, the information, so that you can apply it to your respective situations in your respective countries. Now, what happened with me is I was raised in Canada. And as you can see in the intro, I had a bit of a situation for close to 2 years traveling, hitchhiking all around North America. I do not highly recommend it for today. But back then, it was a blast, and it was a very instructive time. Learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about people throughout the country, throughout Canada, United States, and that launched me into quite an adventure. Became one of the first chaplains in the history of the NBA, and just a lot of things that I learned from the players, the questions they asked, that forced me to begin to start studying on a deeper level. So 1980, that's when I embarked on some very serious study. I would watch films like the BBC series, Africa, A Voyage of Discovery, 8-part series, Eyes of the Prize, Part 1, Part 2, and then a number of books. Met Ivan van Sertima, who is an Afrocentric scholar, who passed away in 2009 from Rutgers University, originally from Guyana. And he was one who was extremely patient with me because, man, I had questions, all kinds of questions about all kinds of situations that I just didn't fully understand and had never been taught in school. So what started out as a journey with players asking me questions as a chaplain, and what did Jesus look like? What part did people of African descent play in biblical and extra-biblical history? They didn't ask it quite that way, but that's what they were asking. And I didn't know how to volley in conversation. So while a lot of people enter into discussions, like in Japan, the challenges between Koreans and Japanese, and vice versa, is palpable. If you're in Europe, Scandinavia, it's the Roma people. And if you're in Mexico, the darker the skin, the more prejudice a person experiences. In India, there are challenges. Muslims and Hindu and Sikhs, and in Great Britain, I mean, there's just so many different layers there from history, of the world domination. Sun never set on the British Empire to today. And in Canada, the native Aboriginals and the French Canadian, the patois, all the different things that people experience around the world. And of course, in America, we have the black-white situation. It seems to be the most pervasive point of interest when it comes to the media and so many different educators and people trying to figure this out. How can we work together as peoples from different backgrounds? So that's been my part of my journey. And a lot of people protest in different ways, legitimate ways, peaceful ways. We have in the 60s, we had the people writing songs, Bob Dylan and others, Blowing in the Wind, and all these different songs that were written. We have a lot of the protest songs that were written for Black Americans that were sung during some of these protest marches, and marches in Selma and Birmingham and Atlanta and St. Louis, all kinds of different places that people fought against bigotry and prejudice and lynching and so many different aspects in this country. So what I've tried to do in my life, and I've made mistakes along the way trying to figure this out, but I've tried to come up with solutions and be a solutionist about these things. It's one thing to moan, complain, and to be a victim and to say, this is happening because of X, Y, or Z. And we meet people from all different backgrounds that say, well, I came through the same situation and I did not allow it to hold me back. Other people, I came through that same situation and it held me back. And it's hard to ascertain sometimes some of the challenges that people have that come against them from a racial standpoint. And so one of the things that I did early on is I ended up co-writing a book called Return to Glory. And it's subtitled The Powerful Stirring of the Black Race. And this book became a film endorsed by Julius Erving and many others, Dr. J in the NBA. That book became a film, a 33-minute film that has been seen by millions of people. Adrian Branch was the narrator for that film. And it became quite a film that was going all over the world. And the impact that it has had on people has been phenomenal. This film, this painting, this is a 4x5 card, but I commissioned a painting for this from a gentleman by the name of Leonard Freeman, who just passed away last year. It's a young man looking back to Africa. And I think that is really what Return to Glory is all about. It's like the ratchet wrench, you got to do the click, 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 and look back and figure things out, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And now we're ready to make a forward move. And some people view the click, click, click as a negative move. And I don't. I think it's important we walk, we run, we crawl straight toward the most uncomfortable topics, whatever that may be. Here in the United States, it's Uncle Tom, 3/5 of a human being, reparations. Should we tear statues down? Scientific racism, and we can go back all the way in UK history. Some of the things that emerged around the great chain of being and so many other different things that have occurred. Manifest destiny, the doctrine of discovery. I'm the type of person that flinches or walks away from any hot topic. I think it's important we walk straight into it. And that's one of the things that with Dr. Walter Milton, we co-authored a textbook and K through 12 called Black History 365, which is now in well over 500 school districts around the country. And it's filled with QR codes, it's images throughout, over 2,500 images. And one of the things that we decided to do is that we're going to have something called the elephant experience. So this is one, for instance, when you see the funky elephant in the upper left-hand corner, you see that that's kind of an approach to dealing with difficult topics. And that's been the desire for myself and so many other people. And that's why we're going to be talking with Julian in just a little bit. But I'd like to play a song right now. It's a song that I wrote that at first was spoken word. And I think you'll capture the spoken word elements in the lyrics as you hear the song. But then I turned into a blues song. And hopefully you can capture the message of that song. Mel, let's play that song.
I'm history and I'm sick and tired of repeating myself. Been watching for centuries, seen it all unfold. Humans are humans, all from the same mold. I was there when Satan swelled with pride. I was also there when Jesus died. Been watching Africa, Israel and Algeria, Russia, China, Persia and Syria, England, Rome, the Huns and Bombay, Turkey, Greece, France and the USA. From slavery's dark days to civil rights fought, Black history's chapters, battles hard fought, segregation, discrimination we must remember. But it's time to unite and make amends together. One thing I've seen since I was just a teen, a lot of good people outweigh the few evil. Break the chains, break the cycle, let's move forward, let love be our revival. No more repeating the mistakes of the past, it's time for change, let's make it last. Tired, let's break free and embrace uncomfortability. No more ignoring, let's heal the divide. Learn from our past, let love be our guide. In America's story, chapters filled with pride, but also deliberate acts of shame we won't hide. Native land stolen, oppression and pain. It's time to acknowledge, it's time to reclaim. From the Civil War to battles for justice and peace, the fight for equality will never cease. We can't erase the past, but we can grow. Let's build a future where the truth will glow. I'm sick and tired of repeating myself, but hope lingers on, it's time to delve into a world where history's lessons we've learned. Let's rewrite the future, let humanity be earned. Break the chains, break the cycle, let's move forward, let God bring revival. No more repeating the mistakes of the past. It's time for change, let's make it last. Break the chains, break the cycle, let's move forward, let God bring revival. No more repeating the mistakes of the past. It's time for change, let's make it last.
There's a lot of thought and heart went into that song, and you can view more if you go to chiefmischiefmaker.com. There's a link tree there, and one of the links is the music from the Freeman music group. I want to introduce our guest for this evening. His name is Julian Netter, and he is the founder of the He's the founder of something called We Are the Builders, and dedicated forensic historian committed to the revitalization of the Black community. His work on rebuilding social and economic infrastructure, bringing racial wealth gap, and reintroducing vocational and technical education as the pathway for youth empowerment and generational change. Now, I've known Julian. I wanted to share a little bit more about his story. I'll let him tell the story of some of the challenges that he experienced and how he's worked through it. He's read thousands of books. You will know that in a few moments. He's very well aware of all the different dynamics. We're going to keep this as politics free as possible. And Julian, come on board. And thank you so much I know you're going through an awful lot in your life right now. And thank you for taking this time out of your crazy schedule to be with us.
No problem. Thank you for the invite, Joel. You know, you're such a great friend and mentor and collaborator. Always got something up your sleeve, always creating something. You're one of the most creative individuals I've ever met. And to see somebody with as many years behind you as you do to still be as creative as a child is a testament to really who you are as a person. That brain of yours does not stop moving. So just wanted to say that. So yeah, glad to be here. Just dealing with a loss in the family. So, man, cancer is something else. It'll really rip the heart out of a person. So, but you know, not the only person that had to deal with it. So, you know, just wanted to say that I'm glad that my aunt made it through Easter Sunday. She passed Monday, so she made it to the Resurrection Sunday. So, amen to that.
You got the whole family there.
On a brighter note, it's good to see your studio. That looks really nice over there. I like that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Julian, if you could maybe paint the picture. Tonight is called A White Man's Journey into Black History. And you're not white. I am whiter than a marshmallow or whatever you want to call it in Canada, and enjoying living in my skin. And you enjoy living in your skin. And we've had some very blunt, straightforward conversations. And just share a little bit with the audience how we met, but particularly the broader case, you know, broader scope in terms of connecting with people around the world.
Right. So we met during the pandemic on the Clubhouse app, which, you know, at one time was kind of the only thing for people to do, being shut into the house and, you know, social distancing and the lockdowns, et cetera. So it was a great way to, you know, still have interactions with people in your local community as well as all over the world, as you said before. And so we met, and I believe it was one of the rooms that I was hosting at that time, and sharing, you know, my take on history as a forensic historian and somebody who spent, you know, 25 years of my 48 years really digging into history to answer the question of why. And the first question was, why am I in this prison cell? Was the first question I had. Bright kid.
Stop there. That sidebar. Share that story a little bit.
Right. So let's see. I was about 19 years old, fresh out of high school and college, and you know, hanging around the wrong crowd, if you will. But in the time that I grew up in America, this was during the time of the Iran-Contra scandal and the proliferation of cocaine, later turned into crack cocaine in this country. And for many people who might not be old enough to remember, but for those of us who do, it was a different world. You know, we could turn the TV on and they would say this thing that we don't really hear anymore. We hear about mass shooters, but we don't hear about innocent bystanders. And so many people lost their lives who had absolutely nothing to do with the narcotics or the gang activity or the crime. It was just a travesty, but it was a different world. And we know now, hindsight vision is 2020, that there were parties who were involved at a very high level in the government, in Nicaragua, and that whole thing, fighting communism over there and using the drug trade in order to arm a military force in Nicaragua, for a reason we're not going to get into now. But that was one of the first questions that I had to ask when I looked in that prison cell in 1997, 8, 9. and said, why are all of these men who look like me in this place? And these circumstances were so new. It was a new phenomenon, gangs, cocaine, crack epidemic, and the drug trafficking and the wealth that it created, but also the violence that it left in its wake. So I started asking questions about how this happened to my community, because I remember the community before the drugs came, and you would have older ladies and gentlemen sitting out on their porch, watching all the kids in the neighborhood. And before you made it home, your parents knew if you did something you weren't supposed to do, because we had what you call community policing. And that doesn't include guns, badges, and a black and white. It was the respect that community members had, that they could point to the actions of a child, take it to the parents. And usually, as we say now today, we got a whooping over there and a whooping when you got home. So there was a lot of structure and discipline in the community at that time. And so I really wanted to understand why the community socially stratified itself into this pressure cooker of guns, drugs, violence, gangs, etc. And so as I started, on that historical journey, it took me through government, politics, race, history of America, the history of the world, the history of religions, different institutions that sometimes we take for granted how these institutions got here, like the U.S. healthcare system. How was that thing created? So many other things that I really, had questions about, in order to understand why I was where I was, with all the promise that I had in my future. So I didn't kill anybody. I didn't hurt anybody, but I was an African-American man in a state called Oklahoma, and they have a reputation all their own, so I don't have to add anything to that. But definitely they were, as we said in those days, they were giving people the maximum sentence they possibly could. And so going on that mission of discovery, it changed me, who I was in prison. It allowed me to start having the confidence to go and attack my case. And I was able to actually give back, if you will, some of the time that was handed to me because it was unjust. And so that gave me a lot of confidence that, wow, like this reading and writing thing. And I was a good student at school, but, you never really apply algebra or geometry to real life. And so this was a time where I was able to use the education I was afforded to actually solve problems, to the most imminent problems that I had going on at that time, which was my freedom and my future. So when I got out of prison, which I spent a total of 14 years in prison, when I got out of prison, I was able to take that same sort of love for education and apply it to things around me. And thus, I continued to read, continued to educate myself, got involved in politics and government and obviously the nonprofit space with We Are the Builders, to learn how to solve problems. But what I learned on my journey was that we can't solve problems that we haven't properly analyzed. And that's what I tried to do, was from an unbiased perspective, really analyze what was the government's role in many of these things. What was the Black community's role? What was the white community's role? What was the global impact on, this drug trafficking into our country? And the craziest thing I've discovered was that it was all based on the fight against communism. Who would ever thought that, right? So there's a lot to the story, more that I could probably go into here on this show, but just kind of giving you a little bit of the seed that sowed me, which was I was in a real life situation, and I was able to apply the education that I was afforded and actually get myself into a better situation in life. And then, get out of prison and actually use that same problem solving technique that you use with Rosetta Stone. Shout out to Rosetta. And, those same sort of problem solving methodologies that you have, developed with the Rosetta Stone program was kind of the same things that I was developing, and it ended up being We Are the Builders for me. So I'll give you a little bit about We Are the Builders later, and I'll let you get to your next question.
Yeah, I want to learn more about that, and I want our audience to learn more. We're going to take a short break here in just a few moments to watch a short video from Rosetta University. But before that, I wanted to help us understand a little bit about the progression when you came out of prison. 14 years, right? And
Yes,
you'd read 2,000 books in there. And what was that like kind of a weird situation? Some people come out of prison and it's like everybody's got their faces in a cell phone, or it's just a totally different world for them. What was that like for you?
Yeah, well, ironically, you might be remembering a story I probably told you, because I've told that story before. My first day when I was released from prison after, more than a decade, I remember going to the courthouse to, start paying the restitutions and fines and fees that you have to take care of when you are released from prison. And being downtown, going to the courthouse, I noticed that everybody had their heads down and were looking at their phone, and nobody had any awareness. And it was the exact opposite of what that time in prison had done to me. And it made me critically aware of everything around me. And so I couldn't understand and wrap my mind around why people would literally be walking and not paying attention to where they're going. So, it was kind of this opposite effect that was happening. When I was incarcerated from 1997, on, this was the development of Wi-Fi, the laptops, the computer age began. And so I didn't have a computer. I was doing old school books, yellow legal pads and number 2 pencil, and had to some degree surpassed what people were doing, here with a whole computer in their hands. Well, people were using the computers to entertain themselves and that sort of a thing. But every book that I grabbed was an opportunity to try to learn something in order to, solve a future problem that I might have.
And so how did you adjust after, once you got out? Because then you had to kind of connect, or were you iconoclastic, stepping away and saying, I'm not bowing my knee to that? Or what went on in your mind as you started to navigate that?
Well, when I came, when you're incarcerated, when you are a person who, sees yourself as ambitious and an achiever and capable, you begin to prepare a plan. And I was fortunate enough to meet a gentleman who was, incarcerated with me, and he got on to me one time about my propensity to spend time at recreation playing basketball. And he said, there's a lot of things you could be doing in prison except bouncing that ball. One of them is probably looking at your case of what you shared with me. And I've looked at your transcript, and you were railroaded, and you need to be in the law library getting yourself home to your family. And so that was kind of the motivation that I needed. And he gave me a key that I still use today. And he said, we might be incarcerated, but we have 3 things: time, opportunity, and information. So we've been afforded the time to use that time as an opportunity to ascertain as much information, pertinent, relevant information, that you could use to improve yourself and to be successful in life. And nobody else gets this time but us, but we have to use the time wisely. They say that a lot. It's a slogan, use your time wisely, but there's not a methodology or sort of a curriculum of how to do that. It's just kind of a euphemism that we say to people. And so after being kind of given these principles from a gentleman named, shout out to Brother Washington, who spent 38 years incarcerated and actually got himself out of prison as well in the law library. So the point is that being able to take this verbal, if you will, reprimand from my elder, and I followed his advice. Some people would say maybe young folks today aren't as disciplined or willing to cede to authority the way that I was, but I had a great respect for this gentleman, the way he carried and comported himself. He was a good guy. And so it was one of the best things I ever did. And that's what I did. That's what I lived by. I used my time to have an opportunity to gain as much information as I possibly could, whether it was about my case or about what I was going to do when I came home. So when I came home, I had a plan, with credit, starting an LLC, creating my own business, because, the thing that you get told a lot is, you got to settle for certain jobs. You get this list of felon-friendly jobs when you get out of jail, and it's Hardee's. They don't even have that anymore, but, McDonald's and these sorts of jobs that, no reasonable man getting out of prison at 30 or 40 or 50 years old, however you might be after spending that much time in prison, you're not going to be able to feed a family, unfortunately, on those wages. And so to avoid putting myself in a compromising position, I figured it was best for me to learn how to be an entrepreneur and come out where I would be able to set my own pay scale and not necessarily just accept minimum wage. So I did, had success. I was in the music industry for some time. I've still got music streaming on iTunes and other platforms, Spotify as well. And so once I got out and I started accomplishing things, you accomplish one thing, you're like, man, what else can I accomplish? So it's kind of like a snowball, and you begin to try new things. And so that was just kind of my attitude. And I would look at people who had never left, they'd never been incarcerated, and not to sound, materialistic, but I was beginning to pass those people. They were asking me for money, asking me for a job. And so it was very humbling. But I knew the reason why I was in the position I was in is because I did what Brother Washington asked me to do, which was, take advantage of the opportunity. So I had way more information at my disposal. I had a whole lot more answers to problems than people that were out here, you know. And so that was kind of, you know, who I was, and the friends that I've made since I've been out of prison for it was 15 years. This past December, I've been free, so I've actually been out now longer than was locked up. And so you know, that's what people love about me, you know. If that's okay for me to say, I think that's what you appreciated about me.
Yes.
And when you talk about my uncompromising and very direct approach with the information is the information. You know, facts don't care about your feelings. You know, that indictment sure didn't care about how I felt about it. You know, it actually took me presenting some alternative facts in order to change, you know, that situation. Facts care about other facts, not feelings. And so, you know, that was kind of, you know, my makeup. That was my mindset. And that's kind of, you know, who you met that day on Clubhouse, probably giving a lesson about 1653 or something crazy like that. And the fact that people would pull up to a room to the hundreds of people, it was surprising to me that people really cared about history and government and politics and things like that. But I think people really do care about history, particularly when they learn things that they had no idea about, that they scratch their head as, how the heck I didn't know that, you know? So.
Thanks. I got a very interesting question on the other side of the break, but we're going to now listen to a video, watch a video called What If?
What if we dare to believe in the inherent brilliance deep in the minds of our young people? What if our commitment to their excellence knew no bounds? What if one solitary experience could be the catalyst for untold innovations from millions of inspired minds? What if that awe-inspiring experience is right here, right now? Don't allow one child to miss the Rosetta Stone Traveling Exhibit experience, curated by the Freeman Institute Foundation. Become part of a world-changing legacy project, empowering generations to become solutionists and equipped to address the greatest challenges. Your action today shapes a future of innovation and problem-solving excellence for tomorrow's leaders. Unlock the future of leadership today with the Rosetta Stone Traveling Exhibit. Join us. Get involved. Dr. Joel Freeman, the visionary founder, eagerly anticipates your questions, ideas, and valuable advice as we embark on this transformative journey. Contact Dr. Joel Freeman. Text the word Rosetta to 410-729-7800 to request a personal call.
A gentleman by the name of Bobby Ivory, who put that together for the Rosetta Universe Project. This is the Rosetta Universe Project booklet. We have folks like Dr. Ben Carson, Smokey Robinson, Kathy Hughes, and others on our advisory board. And I'd love to talk with anyone who has any ideas, questions, comments, connections. We're wide open for any wisdom anyone has to share about this. Rosetta's Universe is basically, we're taking this ancient artifact called the Rosetta Stone and transforming it into a modern metaphor for problem solving and critical thinking for this generation. And that in a nutshell, it's a lot to put that to music, if you would, to share a big story, but feel free to reach out about that. Anyway, right now, what I'd like to do is switch back over to Julian. And Julian, you have been through an awful lot, and it reveals to me something about your character and your nature. One of the challenges, I would think, I'm just conjecturing here, is that when you have kind of pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, you have confronted juvenile thinking and behavior within yourself. How is it in working with other young people that maybe are talking about being victims, are angry, are frustrated, and so many legitimate issues that they can point to as to why they can't do what you've done in the way that you've done it? Yes, you're an inspiration. It's like Michael Jordan. You know, he's a there's a big fight about who is the GOAT, the greatest of all time in terms of basketball. But when it comes to coaching, when he was with the Washington Wizards, it was very difficult as a coach. Put him on the floor, he'll take over. But to motivate and encourage other young players to do what he did, it did something inside of him. That lack of patience, whatever it was very difficult for him. And if you can kind of share what you have done to work through all of that, or maybe you're still working through it.
Well, when you've read 3,600 some odd books or so, early on in the process, I would try to force feed people the information. You don't know this thing, and you get frustrated because people believe fallacies and historical misnomers and things of that nature that disallow them to engage with somebody who is aware of these things in a really high level discussion of the world around us. We could be talking about the latest thing in the news, the latest tragedy, the government's going to do this, or so-and-so is running for this office, or how did this person get rich? When you really don't understand the world around you, it makes it difficult, particularly to have a conversation with somebody like me who's going to, take the time to now actually give it to you. And so that's what I really learned to do. When I first got the information, I wasn't a teacher. I was just a student, but I was a student trying to teach. And the difference between a student and a teacher is the student doesn't have patience for other people. The teacher does. And because the student is there to get what they can get and also to be graded on it. Teachers don't get graded, but we know who the good teachers are and who they're not, but they don't necessarily get a letter next to their name, right? And so what I learned to do was to be patient with people, particularly when I wanted to accomplish some goal or to collaborate at some end, like say with the We Are the Builders. If you actually have a plan and a goal, well, then you have to, make people aware of the plan. You have to make them aware of the goal. You've got to itemize and outline the vision and the process and the human resources involved, the material cost and the effort, the labor, the sacrifice, the timing of it, all these things. And once you become, a leader, and I hate to use that term, but I say that leaders are the people who are there first. If you watch NASCAR, they don't call the guy at the back of the race the leader. But in many businesses, the guy who's sitting on his laurels and not doing anything is called the leader, while the person who's literally out there doing the manual labor, the physical labor that is the result of whatever competition or business you're in, is the person who's really doing the leading. And so what I realized is leaders have to be willing to, put their gloves on and get in there. And so that's where I developed the ability to be patient with people, to teach. I learned to ask questions. I think that was one of the best things that I ever learned to do, was not to tell people what I know. It's to ask them what they know. Because when a person is put on the spot and asked, do you know the capital of such and such? And they don't. It's a very humbling experience. Now some people might not be mature enough to deal with it. They might want to fight you because you're telling them something they don't know. But the overwhelming majority of people, once being asked a question and they don't have the answer, and you give them the answer, well, now you've built a relationship with them. And in some cases, they might come back with questions of their own. And so that was the sort of the style that I developed, if you will. After consuming all the information, you then have to know how to distribute the information back to people, to interest them to want to read some of the books that I've read so we can actually talk about them. So the answer to your question is to not get frustrated with people and have more patience with people, is to realize if I really have a goal, it's going to take more than me to get there. And so if I'm the person who has the information, then it's my job to become the teacher, to share the information with other people. And so it's a sacrifice, it's a responsibility, it's a role that you have to accept and take on. You're a historian. Nobody told you to be a historian. Nobody gave you the instructions to say, go be a historian, Joe, right? I'm sure you collected enough history to where you were like, probably your wife was like, Joe, you need to get this stuff out of the house. You might need to get you a museum, you know? And so at the end of the day, it was you solving a problem. The solution is that you are. And the problem for me is people not knowing. I had to become the instrument and the vessel which through they were able to know. And so that's how I was able to get over the frustration, that whole thing with patience with people.
Well, that's a great response. Because there's, people with solutions, and then we need to mix emotional intelligence with that solution, with our solutions. And it just takes learning. I love the idea of asking questions and getting into the life of the person. I think it's someone said we're all tuned into WIIFM. What's in it for me? And if we can make our solutions packaged around what's in it for me, for that person, then I think it becomes more palatable. A little bit of honey with a pill, and it's much easier to absorb. Our listeners, our watchers, viewers are encouraged to ask questions. I don't see a question here necessarily, but you may or may not want to respond to this, Julian. But Maryland, she says, I take issue with what a fact is a fact. With a fact is a fact. Facts are always relative to time and space. Newtonian physics were seen as limited after Einstein, and Einstein, seeking a unified theory of matter, had to confront quantum mechanics. When we observe the movement of particles, it alters their movement. Facts are at the bottom, subjective, which isn't a bad thing. It's the subjective nature of facts that leads to new questions. So I don't see a question there necessarily, but does that launch anything in you?
Well, the example given, is there anything tangible that is being described as a fact in that sentence that we could hold in our hand?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not necessarily empirical. We can't touch it. And the things that I deal with are things that we can touch and have touched people. I deal with things like social stratification. There's not much Newtonian theory around why certain groups of people arrive at the station and place they are within different societies. We could look at India with the caste system. We wouldn't be lost with the facts of these people are what is Kamala Harris's family? They are from the
Philippines.
I'm going to think of it in a second. But Tamil, they are from the Tamil class, right? And so there are different castes in India. These are facts, right? And so we know those facts. When we start talking things that are not tangible and not empirical, I agree completely with what was said, that there is a level of subjectiveness to what a fact is. But I think when we look at the real world around us and the things that I study and that I work on and that I delve into, the facts are pretty much what they are. Oftentimes hidden, oftentimes covered, not discovered, but once they're able to be discovered, they're the type of facts that you can hold in your hand, and there's really no doubt about what they are. So hope that kind of.
And that's one of the things that I know for me in terms of a white man's journey into Black history is to actually find artifacts and documents that prove what was being said. Is this true or not? And here's a letter, handwritten letter from so-and-so, that shows that this is what was really going on behind the scenes. And that was what really drove me to develop my Black history collection in that regard. Marilyn, we want to thank you so much for that. Julian, as you look at, as we think about the use of Black history as a gateway, if you will, that's what it's been for me, is a gateway for personal understanding, to understand about the injustices, but then also to understand about the people who fought, the abolitionists, the studies that have been done even on lynching. Back in 1978, the Tuskegee Institute discovered that out of 40 states, that 22 of the states, more white people were lynched than black people. The stuff like that has astonished me because of white people fighting for the cause and paying the ultimate price for it. But the thing is, as you look around at race relations in America, and let's just talk about America now, what are you sanguine? Are you hopeful about race relations in America?
I'm always hopeful because there is a truth that we can arrive at, and we just haven't arrived at that truth. One of those truths is we know who Cassius Clay is, the boxer who was named Cassius Clay before he changed his name to Muhammad Ali. But do we know who Cassius Clay, his father actually, was named after? Most people just don't know about Cassius Clay, the abolitionist.
He was a bad dude.
Was one bad dude.
Yeah.
And that's why I love you, Joe, because I could bring up this gentleman and we could go back and forth and banter and probably share stuff that maybe, one piece that you didn't know or vice versa, that I didn't know. And so the thing about race relations is that people don't understand race. They don't understand race. Ironically, I was told recently in my workplace by HR that we can't use racism. I was like, what? I was like, that's too inflammatory. I said, okay, but what if we're actually describing a situation of racism? Well, let's find a better word to use. And so I asked my HR professional, could you please define race and racism for me? And I mean, it was a call like this, a Teams meeting. We were on video, and there was just no answer. And my HR professional is actually a young lady who's of Indian origin. So nothing against her not being a true American, but we're talking about somebody who immigrated to America at 24, 25, and now began to study the history of this country. People who've been in America their whole lives don't know the history of this country. So it really puts you at a disadvantage. And so again, there goes back to me asking questions. And so when they were unable to answer the question, I literally took this HR disciplinary call where they were calling to discipline me, probably to give me some sort of disciplinary misconduct about this issue. And so by the time I got done, I had taught these people, I work in healthcare, and I taught them about the Henrietta Lacks. I taught them about the Tuskegee experiment because we were marketing to some over 65 seniors at a community center, and they were all African-American women. And one of the ladies looked at some of the advertisement and she's like, it's not marketed to me. It's not for us. And so I went and asked her a couple more questions. And so we had a really good conversation about how the healthcare system in America has been weaponized against Black people, particularly Black women. And so I took this back to my supervisor, and, he just really didn't know what to do with it. And so I was just trying to explain to him, like, when we're marketing to a specific group of people, we have to have cultural competency of that group. If we go to market to an Asian family, we walk in their door, we should probably know to take our shoes off. Or if we're asked, we shouldn't feel any way about it, because that's being respectful of their culture, right? And so cultural competency goes both ways. So the point I'm making is that most people don't really truly understand the origin of race. They don't know what racism is. They're not familiar with the 1638 Maryland Doctrine of Exclusion. A lot of people know about the Civil War. They have no idea why we call debates as a formally structured activity Lincoln-Douglas debates always, right? We don't know that history. We don't know the history of Bleeding Kansas, how the precursor to the Civil War was actually the Bleeding Kansas incident, where they removed the protections of the Missouri Compromise and they tried to turn Kansas into what they call a sovereign state, popular sovereignty state, meaning if we got 501 people who want slavery and 499 who don't, this is a slave state, right? So this is what really culminated and led to the Civil War. And so for white Americans, if we were in the school actually teaching the truth about American history, not just Black history, because Black history is American history. And so when we talk about American history, who were all the white people who died in the Union Army that led to the freedom of the slaves? Can anybody name one soldier, not the generals, not the president, but just name me a soldier from the Civil War who was white and died that led to the freedom of Black people? People can't tell you that. That's why we have a race problem in America, because white people in America have nothing to feel proud of when the story of racism comes up. But if our young students, Black and white, are educated about some of the valiant, brave efforts that were given by some non-melanated people, white folks, I think it would give the impetus and the attitude for young white students to be like, hey, man, that guy Cassius Clay is a bad man. I think I'm a bad man too. And so now people can conceptualize being, tough or, stern with actually really human principle, which is compassion, right? And so once we marry those things together, now we have created a compassionate group of people who are cognizant of their history. But as a man once said, those who don't know their own history are doomed to repeat it. And so we're continuing to repeat a history because we don't understand the history of Black people in the Republican Party, perhaps. This thing called lynching. The reason why more white people were lynched in America than Black people was because the origin of lynchings was to destabilize the Republican or the conservative support, the abolitionist support for the Black former enslaved people post-slavery. And so those, quote, first Ku Klux Klan outfits had what you call like a playing card in their hands. There was a card of all of the Black members of Congress, hundreds of them, and the white Republicans who had supported them, helped them, elect them, and were their constituents. These men were changing laws in the states in the South rapidly. This is what led to the beginning of the Ku Klux Klan, not just because white people even hate Black people. No, it was a specific subset of white people who had to first fight against the white people who did the right thing, the upright thing, the just thing, which was fight against slavery. For whatever reason they did it. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason. Some people, I'll talk to some scholars who will say, well, those white people didn't care about Black people. Who cares if they cared? They put their lives on the line. They fought and died. Would you do that today? You care, right? And so I think to some degree, without sounding like a white apologist, we just have to give credit to the white people who actually did the right thing and made those sacrifices. Because I think when we start there, I think there are more white Americans who would be so much more welcoming of a conversation about how to solve the race problem today if they knew that white people were a part of trying to solve the race problem yesterday. I'm not asking white people today to do anything that you haven't been doing since 1630 when the Quakers in this country did the first protest against slavery, right? It was the religious Quakers who actually were the first people to protest in this country against slavery, right? So when we don't know the history, we don't have a decent concept of it. And so this is what race relations in America is today, is that whites are bad, Blacks are oppressed. While there are Black billionaires and there are white people who aren't bad. So we're not being honest about what is the makeup of these two groups in order for us to solve the problem that exists between the two.
I wanted to clarify something before we go to this question, is that it was more states with white people being lynched. It wasn't more Blacks being lynched. It was just the number of states. A higher number of whites were lynched in those states. And I just wanted to paint that picture that there's been a lot of people on both sides that have been fighting this thing for centuries. This is something that has vexed our country for centuries. Here's a question from Christian Norton. Many lynchings of white people were Italian Jews, often described as swarthy. Often it was based on faulty anthropology and sociology, such as evolutionary psychology, where white was at the bottom, was at the tops, and Blacks at the bottom. Italians and Jews were just a step above. Please comment. I don't know for sure about the swarthy complexions. I'm sure that there's been plenty written about that. I just know that when it comes down to it, that there were people that were giving aid and comfort to Black people, and we have the whole Underground Railroad, of course, that a lot of white people participated in. The fugitive slave laws drove people to go north into Canada in the mid-1850s or so. And so it was a situation where, whether they were swarthy or not, I mean, we have the Freedom Riders, a lot of Jews, a lot of whites, a lot of folks, young students were in the South getting beaten up and killed and everything else. So I'm not sure that was a huge factor. They were looking at who was aiding and abetting, who was providing comfort, who was hiding people, who was employing people, and that was the target. And the threats were previous, that were given prior to, if you don't do this, you know what's going to happen to you, and still doing it and then paying the ultimate price. So do you have anything you want to comment on that, Julian?
Yeah, great observation, Christian. I will say this. When we start looking at this particular period, again, being a forensic historian, I'm very heavy on chronology. Sometimes when we take things out of chronology, we lose balance in what we're discussing. And so when we look at anthropology and sociology in what, 17th century? To what level have anthropology and sociology developed at that stage? Right? We're still building the first universities in the world at that time. Mm-hmm. So sure, there were mistakes that would be made anthropologically and sociologically because they weren't necessarily disciplines taught to masses of students. Additionally, I will say that there's absolutely no doubt about who the white people were who were lynched. There's no doubt about who those people were. There's actually it was a congressional hearing that was held in 1867, I believe. I have to go back to my notes from a lecture I gave years ago. And when I read the transcripts, it actually described who the people were that were the Ku Klux Klansmen. They were former Dixiecrats, Democrats. They were former, Confederates, right? And so the Confederacy lost political momentum with Reconstruction. And Black people were being elected into office, not just like I would say they are today when I look at a lot of Black leaders. They're not passing laws and legislation changing the quality of life for Black people. They're just really, no disrespect, they're Black people who hold an official public office, that have a nice title, but they are not doing anything to take the boot of white supremacy off of the neck of Black America or any other group of people for that matter. They're collecting a check, living in really nice neighborhoods, and in most cases, next to the same very white people that they say that they don't like, ironically, right? And so I think what we have to do is understand why they lynched these people, because once we understand the who, what, why, when, and where of lynching in America in the 19th century, we will understand that there would have been no reason to lynch Jews and swarthy people. They had no political influence. This is the reason why the Ku Klux Klan wore hoods, because many of them were elected officials, public officials, known entities, businessmen, et cetera, who couldn't reveal their identity, right? But the abolitionists never hid their identity, and so after the Civil War, probably the last thing they were thinking was that some terror cell was going to be created here in the United States of America in order that they attacked them. And I want to give one additional point. There's a great piece of research that was done by the Executive Intelligence Review. It's a research periodical, a research group. Now, please don't get caught in the hype of the man who founded it, Lyndon LaRouche. He's not a very good character. But I will say this. If you look at the research that was done by the Executive Intelligence Review, it's irrefutable. And so when we look at the Civil War and what really happened in the Civil War, people don't understand that the Civil War was very much brought about by British agents in America. Remember, we stole their country, quote unquote. Right. And so Britain never ceded its interest in America after the War of 1812, when they burned down the White House and Jane Madison ran down the street in Washington, D.C. No. Right. They consistently had interest in America. And there are certain particular groups. I'm not going to name any of them. I challenge people to go find the Executive Intelligence Review report on the Lincoln assassination. It also has some information in there about the Kennedy assassination. And you'd be surprised to really see who the forces were that were involved in a setting about this thing called the Civil War. And the final point is we don't understand who the people are who are lynched when we don't understand this political complexity, which could be shown to be culminated in what happened to the man who was the Secretary of the Confederacy at the end of the war. Well, he went to Britain and became one of the greatest writers of jurisprudence in the history of England. His name is none other than Judah P. Benjamin, right? And so when we understand who the characters were and what the play was, what was happening in England, we got to know about the Battle of Waterloo, which completely upended the city of London and who had control over the finances of London. This is when Rothschild, with his agents and his spies, was able to get word of Napoleon losing it at Waterloo. And he then used a deceptive method, and he told the financiers and the people in London that Napoleon had won. Well, England was their next stop. London was the first stop on that trip. And so everybody was in fear. So people were selling off their fortunes for pennies on the dollar. Rothschild bought it all up.
Julian, we got a minute left. Someone's asking, Shelley's asking, are you attributing motivation for why a Union soldier fought in the Civil War? Give it 10 seconds if you can, and then I want you to share how people can get in touch with you.
All right, awesome. Well, any man who's willing to put his life on the line about a cause or an issue, I think we should take a deeper look at what that cause and issue was. It was obviously important to them. And so I think we understand why the Union soldiers fought. It was on their uniforms. It was called the Union, the thing that we had before this is the secession of the Confederacy. You can find me at www.wearethe.builders. You'll see this little website right here. You can kind of scroll through there, see some of the things that we've done and what we plan to do going forward. You can find me online at Kingsick, KINGSIIK, on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, etc.
Thanks so much, Julian. It's such a joy seeing you again, and I wish you all the best with your family too at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The end of another show, and thank you folks for hanging in there for this whole hour with us on the Chief Mischief Maker, the Mischief Maker Show.
You have just experienced another episode of the Mischief Maker broadcast. Hit the subscribe button. Connect at chiefmischiefmaker.com. Thanks for coming along for the ride. And hopefully, you are now a bit closer to becoming a mischief maker in your part of the world.